Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all warm inside. And thank you, Susan. I have been after Leonard Lauder for fashion icons for over 2 years, trying to get him here to join me on this stage to talk about his extraordinary stories of his fascinating life and career. It hasn't been easy to schedule, because at 81, he is as busy as ever, still working every day and booked for multiple events every night. And he has just recently returned from a month-long honeymoon. But word has it he still made time to check in on the Lauder business in a few Neiman's and Saks stores while he was away. So there is always hope, and thankfully always time for love, and congratulations to Leonard and Judy. But it is his love of family, business, art, and culture that we want to learn more about tonight. Some of you may be wondering, why is he a fashion icon? It's because the fashion and beauty business is inextricably linked. The beauty business is integral to fashion. This recent Fashion Week's runway shows demonstrated how important makeup and hair is to the fashion message. Trust me, you wouldn't want to see a show where the hair and makeup wasn't addressed as part of the designer's vision. Leonard Lauder grew up in New York City with a hard-working mother who had a dream and a vision, and she pursued it at all costs. And her name just happens to be on the majority of beauty products in all our bathrooms, boudoirs, and cosmetic cases. He has been called the Moral Center and Chief Teaching Officer at the Estée Lauder Companies, where he is now Chairman Emeritus and Senior Member of the Board of Directors. The company, which is one of the world's leading manufacturers and marketers of prestige and luxury skincare, makeup, fragrances, and hair care products, has annual sales of over $10 billion. With brands such as the flagship brand Estée Lauder, Clinique, MAC, Bobbi Brown, La Mer, Origins, Jo Malone, Smashbox, Aveda, Bumble and Bumble, and the most recent acquisitions, Le Labo, Glam Glow, Frederic Malle, and Rodin. And Lauder is the home of designer fragrances from Tom Ford to Donna Karan, Michael Kors, Tommy Hilfiger, and Tory Burch. Leonard Lauder is a brand builder. He acquires companies that are about people with entrepreneurial talent. However, his skill as a collector actually started when he was 5 or 6 years old, when he spent his 5-cent allowance to buy 5 postcards of the Empire State Building. He now has a collection of over 150,000 postcards. 20,000 have already been donated to the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, and a commitment for another 120,000 also for the MFA. He then collected posters of war bonds, Art Nouveau ocean liners, Swiss modern, and German expressionism, and he still has his first acquisition, a Toulouse-Lautrec poster. Years later was a turning point in his collecting when he raised his hand at an auction and bought a collage by Kurt Schwitters. His first huge purchase was a painting by Gustav Klimt and an Egon Schiele. He then bought his first Cubist painting, Picasso's Carafe and Candlestick, which during the next 40 years grew into the largest and most significant collection of Cubist works ever in private hands. That is, until he pledged 81 paintings, works on paper, and sculptures valued at over $1 billion to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The exhibition, which opened this past October and closed last week, was nothing short of spectacular. And it is one of the greatest gifts anyone has ever given, not just to the Metropolitan Museum, but to New York City and to all of us. Leonard has said, "You only regret what you don't buy." And collecting is a passion, possibly an illness or an obsession, or all of the above. And we are truly the beneficiaries of that possible illness. His generosity, humanity, and philanthropy is legendary, from working with his late wife Evelyn on the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, to the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, and the University of Pennsylvania's Joseph H. Lauder Institute of Management and International Studies, and a zillion more. But if I mention all the boards, charitable organizations, and gifts, I'll never get him out here. So let's first take a quick look, a sizzle reel about the remarkable Leonard Lauder.
I learned a lot from my parents, and they had wonderful instincts, and they had a good, solid understanding of consumer behavior. When I first started with Estée Lauder, I was the only salesman. I was it. I traveled all over the country.
Quality is our business. Pay attention to the details. Little things do make the difference. God is in the details. None of us is as smart as all of us. Remember that. We are all passionate about what we do, and it is that passion that drives this company. There's no substitute for ethics and integrity. No substitute at all. You send someone a thank you note. It doesn't even have to be an official thing. A little scrap of paper that says, thanks for doing this and that. And before you know it, people are really turned on. Growth is the people in this room. Each and every one of you is the engine of growth. We want to bring the best to everyone we touch.
Our ambition is to be simply the best company in the world. I didn't say the biggest company, I said the best company in the world. And best means the best people, the best products, the best consumer acceptance, the best consumer relations, the best ethics, the best of anything and everything.
I knew I wanted to be the number one, nothing less than the number one. And I had that dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a very warm welcome to the one and only Leonard Lauder.
What a welcome. Can I leave now?
Nope. Nope. We are so thrilled to have you here. This is great. And as you acknowledged backstage, you knew I was pestering you for a long time.
Easy.
Thank you. So, Leonard, we always start at the very beginning. So we're going to go back a few years. You were born on March 19th, 1933, as I mentioned in the intro. That makes you almost how old?
81. Almost 82. I'm en route.
You're en route.
Yeah.
So then, and your birthday's soon. You're a Pisces.
Right.
You probably don't believe in astrology, do you?
We created a line of compacts for Estée Lauder. 12 different signs of the zodiac. It was a blowout, and it sold out. I said, here's a chance to make Pisces big. Is anyone here a Leo? Yeah.
Leo sell the best?
The number one seller of all. Okay.
Interesting.
So you've just heard my astrology story. Okay.
Okay. Well, some of the Pisces strengths that I read about are compassionate, adaptable, accepting, devoted, and imaginative. And one of the weaknesses is oversensitive. Pisceans have formidable intuitive ability, are independent and inspired by life's events. Their creativity comes shining through, and they dream of imaginary world of happy people and happy endings. They need other people to keep them grounded and on the right track. Pisces is the most sensitive sign of the zodiac, and a Pisces goes out of their way to help a friend. And I've heard that about you many, many times over. You are sensitive and loyal, and take a friend's problem and make it your own and offer suffer with them. Does any of that ring true?
I think so. Listen, you've all heard that I have my brand new wife, Judy, is here, my bride. Judy, where are you? Sit down. We were married. We were married on January the 1st, New Year's Day. So we are brand new. Now, Judy, after hearing all that, you could still run. You couldn't run.
She's not running anywhere. She's
Okay.
a lucky lady.
She is. I am. I'm the lucky guy.
Nice. You grew up on the Upper West Side. Where exactly?
Well, I was born in the Women's Hospital, 110th Street, just off Broadway, and I believe, I can't remember exactly, but the first apartment we lived in was on 78th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. And so my earliest memories are the crib I had, okay? So that if I could remember crib, I was kind of young. Anyway, we moved a little bit after that, every 2 or 3 years. But in those days, everyone sort of moved around. And after living in an apartment, we went into a series of hotels which had cleaning services. So my mother wouldn't have to make the beds. Yeah.
But I heard when you were living on the Upper West Side, you also used to go to the Tiptoe Inn on 86th and Broadway.
Oh,
Was it
yes.
for egg creams?
No, matzo ball soup.
Matzo ball soup.
My father used to take me to Tiptoe Inn every Sunday morning, every Sunday for lunch. And I would order, I think, the most expensive things on the menu, which were shrimp cocktail, etc. And he laughed. He said, he said, "You eat like a buyer." I thought a buyer was someone who ate a lot and expensively.
And that came true, though, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, tell me. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have one brother, Ronald, who's younger than you by how many years?
11 years.
Were you very close as young boys growing up?
I was sort of Ronald's older brother and surrogate father. My mother was working very, very hard, as was my father. I went with Ronald for PTAs, the Parent Teachers Association days. Yeah? And so I went to the Bronx High School of Science, and Ronald also went there 11 years later. And so I went with him on that day, and I saw my old English teacher. And she looked at me and said, "How nice to see you again. Where are you practicing?" I never became a doctor, as all my classmates did.
Okay. What was home life back then? Having a working mother who was making face creams and beauty products. Did you understand what she was doing at that early age at home?
Really? I understood everything. But I'll tell you, look, I went to PS 87, which is on 77th Street and Broadway, and we lived on West End Avenue and 75th Street. I would come home every day for lunch, and she would cook me a hot lunch every day for the entire time I was there. Okay? No matter what happened, she was there to cook me the lunch. And I still, to this day, you've heard about people who love nursery school food. I love lamb chops.
Is that...
With a baked potato with lots of butter, mashed up with salt. Thank you, Mother.
That was her specialty.
That was her, yeah.
Every day you had lamb chops?
No. It changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but there weren't a lot of working moms so much at that time. Was this ever, like an issue for you that she was always so busy?
When she came to school, she would get all dressed up. She'd wear a fur coat and this and the third thing. I said, "Why can't you dress like all the other mothers?" And I didn't understand. But the fact is,
She looked great, and she was a great mother and never stopped being a great mother. And later on, when I went to work with her, it was very tough being a son to a mother and working with a mother who was the boss. Except she said she was the boss, and I thought I was the boss. And that's another story.
We'll get there.
Oh, I can't
We'll
wait.
get there. But I want to go back to PS 87 because I
Okay.
read something interesting, that when you entered first grade, you had to bring in 5 cents to open a savings account at a bank.
Yeah.
And you continued to only make deposits and no withdrawals through all those years.
That's true. We had to bring 5 cents in, and they opened up a savings account at the Central Savings Bank. The building is still there on 73rd and 74th Street in Broadway, if you know it. It was a great building. Okay, I kept that savings account going through my entire time in school, and then when I went through the U.S. Navy, and it built up. I can't say it was considerable. However, we needed to make a payroll in Estée Lauder in the late 50s. And my parents were away in Europe, and there was no money in the bank for Estée Lauder. I went into that savings account, and I cleaned it out and made the payroll. And I have no regrets. Because
That's great. That's great. Did the company pay you back for that account?
What's the next question?
All right. The next question was kind of like 1939. Your mom and dad divorced when you were about 6 years old, right?
Yeah, divorce or separated, I have no idea. Well, all I know is that they parted. So, and the answer that they gave me was that my father needed to be closer to business. You know, I accepted it for what it was worth. However, I saw him every weekend, and he was a great father, and she was a great mother. And I can't say anything other than the fact that I love them both, and I love that period of my life.
And then they did remarry several years later,
Yeah.
get back together.
Yeah.
How and exactly when did you become infatuated with postcards?
Oh, I don't know. I love postcards, and I love the way they were done, and I used to get an allowance of 5 cents a week. So one time, I took my nickel and went to Woolworth's of late lamented fame and bought 5 cards of the Empire State Building because I just loved the way it looked. And I don't have those cards anymore. I don't know what happened to them, but the fact that I loved it so much, I bought it 5 times. And I started then. And so anyway, if I may, we went down, my mother would go down to Florida
Right.
during the winter to sell her cosmetics. And I would go with her. And she'd take me out of school, put me in a school down there. And I went to all of the Art Deco hotels. And I was a little kid. I put my hand over the counter of the check-in desk and took a handful of postcards. I still have them, and I love them.
Were they stored in shoe boxes under the bed?
I stored everything under the bed, so let's not go there either.
Okay. Oh, now this is curious. What's under the bed? Tell us about meeting a stamp dealer who collected German postcards, and I read that he taught you some things about.
Well, I know I used to go to stamp dealers to buy old postcards because now I would pay. They were very expensive, 1 cent each. Sometimes something was really expensive, 5 cents. And there was this stamp dealer on 42nd Street of all places, between 6th Avenue and Broadway. And I would go there every once in a while, and he would have a shoebox full of old postcards. And one day, a postcard collector walked in, and he started to explain to me exactly which was which and what was what. I loved education, I loved learning, and I was hooked. And from that time on, I collected picture postcards. Now, relax. Picture postcards are cheaper to buy than Picasso's. So,
And I read somewhere that Evelyn at the time, your late wife, called your postcards your mistress.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, your parents, when you were young, let you travel freely around New York City. And 2 to 3 times a week, you went to the Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah.
What did you love about film? You were interested in film there.
I was fascinated with old films, with cinema. And since I went to school on 77th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, I could take the trolley downtown and then the bus later on, and I would go to the MoMA 2 or 3 times a week to see the movies. I would arrive early, and I'd walk around, and I'd see all my favorite pictures. And to this day, I can still remember seeing Chella Chow's Hide and Seek, and some of you may remember that picture, or Peter Bloom's Hide and Seek about Mussolini and the Eternal City, Peter Bloom's Eternal City. And it was, I'll tell you something, I loved doing that. And to this day, that's what got me started loving art, because of wandering up and down through the galleries of MoMA.
Yes, and you would savor a picture over and over again.
Yeah.
And said you'd make it yours.
Yep.
It's incredible. And very early on, you were interested in the history of France, from 1900 to the beginning of World War I. What was it about that period that intrigued you?
You have to remember that France was the leading city in Europe, if not in the world. They had their exhibition, their Universal Exhibition in 1889, which is when they built the Eiffel Tower, and then the exhibition in 1900. Do you know 50 million people came to Paris in 1900 to see that show? And I got fascinated about the period in Paris. Art Nouveau was just coming out. It was then called Bing, after the gallery. Fashion was changing, everything was changing. And to this day, I'm fascinated about the period.
Okay. Let's go to Bronx High School of Science, which is one of the best schools in New York. After high school, I read that you spent every afternoon working for your parents' business in their first factory, which was an apartment building on the corner of Central Park West and 64th Street.
Boy, you do your research pretty well. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And it was a rented space that had been a restaurant.
But first, it had been a restaurant, and first they rented the kitchen, and so that was where the first factory was. And then as business expanded, they rented what was the restaurant, and that's where the office was. And I worked there every afternoon. If I wasn't playing soccer, because I was on the soccer team too, and I got well paid, 25 cents an hour.
And you put that in that savings account.
I did.
You delivered packages on your bike. You typed every invoice during high school.
Yeah.
But how many people were working there at the time? I mean, was it your mother, your father? Was it lots of
My mother never went to the factory,
Oh.
and my father never went where she was. That's why the marriage lasted so long. Okay.
So who was in the factory? How many people did that? I mean, she started up a business with face creams. I mean, it's two face creams.
No.
Two what?
2 people worked in the factory.
2 people.
Yeah.
And she was buying boxes and jars?
No,
and
she did. My father did all the buying.
Your father did all that?
Yeah. I'll tell you something. He was a very wise man, and at the very beginning, we had no money and no credit. So he had to pay in advance for the components that they bought. And he, at one time, put down money for boxes from someone in the Long Island City. They didn't ship the boxes and didn't answer his phone calls. So he took me out one Saturday morning, and I was going to go with him to the box company to either get the boxes or the money. So the lesson that I learned from that is that there's a moment when the person with the money, the person who has the money gives the money to someone, and then the person with the money has the experience, and the man who had the experience has the money. That's what I learned, that you have to be very careful, but I was with him to see what it was like to struggle and to build a business bit by bit by bit. And that lesson has never left me.
Well, and your mother was influenced by her uncle, an Uncle John Schatz, who was a chemist.
Right.
So she worked with him at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Describe what that was like. I mean, how you create beauty cream.
Truth, I don't know, because all I know is that he was Uncle John Schatz, and she would buy his products and she'd sell them and give facials to the people. So that Schatz was the name, her mother's maiden name. Her mother was Hungarian. By the way, in our first office, after I had gotten out of the Navy, I was in our little office, and the secretary came in and said, Mr. Lauder, there's a Mr. Pierre DuPont waiting for you in the reception room. I came out, and there was a man well-dressed wearing a pair of spats. I said, Mr. DuPont? He says, that's me. That was my mother's uncle. And I said, well, how did you get the name Pierre DuPont? He said, well, when I came into the United States, the man who was taking my name down couldn't spell my last name, and I heard the name DuPont. I thought that was a nice name. So you can tell your friends that you're with the DuPont tonight.
So your father handled going to the lawyers and the trademarks and building the business, that side of it at the beginning?
My father did all the production, all that. And it was a good partnership. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And your mother was checking out people's medicine chests and bathrooms and cabinets to see what colors they had in their places to make the boxes the right colors.
I'm the one who looked into the medicine chest. She had better manners. No, it was a good partnership. She did the fashion, the styling, and she dealt with the editors, and my father dealt with the manufacturing, the production, and the finances. It really worked very well.
And she started by going to beauty salons first.
Right.
With her products, and had a captive audience who was sitting there, and she was great for touching people's faces.
What she would have a little concession there, and she would go and do facials. But I'll tell you something. Do you have the moment for a little story? She had a concession in a place right near where my office is now, a place called Florence Morris, home of the Ash Blondes. Don't ask me why I remember that, but I do. Anyway, and a woman came up to her, to this little counter that she had, and my mother said, oh, that's a lovely blouse that you're wearing. Can you tell me where you bought it? She said, my dear, there's no sense my telling you where I bought it because you couldn't afford it. When you hear a story like that resonated with her over the years, that's one of the things that drove her, okay? And so that it's a story that stayed with me for my life and stayed with her for her whole life.
Absolutely. And she also had an expression I read that was telephone, telegraph, and tell a woman.
Right. Yeah. She had. That's how you sell things. Now listen, she was very funny. A woman would say, "Do you have a night cream?" She didn't have a night cream. She said, "How does the cream know whether it's day or night outside?" Don't you have anything smaller? Are you going on a trip? She was really very funny. Yeah.
Well, she figured all that out.
Yeah.
And in 1946, when you were 13, she finally cracked her big account at Saks Fifth Avenue, her first big prestige department store. Can you remember that time and describe that and what that meant? And how soon after that did gift with purchase, which was her invention, happen?
Okay, this is a little story. First, forgive me. 1946 is when they officially went into business. 1948 was when they started to sell Saks Fifth Avenue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The date gets a little confused. All right. And why do I remember it? Because I helped them stuff envelopes, sending out to all their customers a little gold engraved card. Estée Lauder Cosmetics were now available in Saks Fifth Avenue. They closed all the beauty salons and moved it into Saks Fifth Avenue alone. And so the rest was history. Now, they decided when they went into business, they said, we should advertise. And they went to see some advertising agency. They had no money, maybe $50,000 at that time. And the advertising agency said, that gets you nothing, please go away. So they came up with an idea. This was my mother's idea. Let's give samples, not little schmitzicks like this. Let's give a big sample of face powder and invite people in to the store to get a box of face powder free. And they would use it, it would be really a 60-day supply of it. And they liked it. After they used it for 60 days, they came back and bought it again. So they gave that away, then they gave away some cream, and then after a while, they said, let's make it a little bit larger, and do something else, and let's say you have to buy something to get the gift. And that's where the so-called gift with purchase came from. It was a brilliant idea, brilliant, and it's what really drove the company for years. Look, there were two things. One was outright giveaway or gift with purchase, and the other was in 1953, she invented Youth Dew bath oil, which was a bath oil that doubled as a skin perfume. It had an incredible fragrance. It was the sexiest thing that you've ever smelled in your life. I promise you. Listen, I married Judy, who uses it. And, okay. And if any of you, if there are any single women here, let me give you some advice, okay?
Used to.
Believe me, trust me. Okay, so the fragrance was so good, something like 20 years later, the hottest perfume in the world at that time was a new fragrance by Yves Saint Laurent called Opium. Anyone ever smell opium? Mm-hmm. That's Youth Dew. It's Youth Dew, I promise you. So anyway, Youth Dew drove the company. One more minute?
Go ahead. It's all yours.
We did so well with it, so well, that our accountant said, at that time we were not incorporated. You have to do something because you're paying all your money to the government. Remember, the tax rates then were very, very high. I think something like 80% at some time. So we formed a corporation called the Fragrance Products Corporation, which I underwrote. And that's another story. And the Fragrance Products Corporation sold all of our fragrances. First Youth Dew, then the fragrance Estée. We changed later on, the Fragrance Products Corporation bought a little cosmetic company called Estée Lauder. So the Estée Lauder of today was a company that started years ago as a Fragrance Products Corporation from one sexy fragrance.
Wow.
If you use it and it doesn't work, write me a letter. Okay.
Is Youth Dew still a huge
It's
seller?
huge, yeah.
I'm actually wearing Modern Muse tonight, because since I couldn't wear clothing from the designer that I always wear, I went and had my complete makeup and fragrance done by Estée Lauder at Bloomingdale's.
Fern, I love you. Thank you for doing that.
I had to do it for you.
Yeah. But by the way, in case some of you didn't realize it, I'm a salesman.
Okay. You went to Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
What did you study there?
Well, before business, but I want to tell you. What do you do if it's the Wharton School of
But it was undergraduate as well?
Yeah, but wait. So, listen, I'm not finished with you yet. So, you think that she's running this?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Anyway, so every Sunday morning, my parents would read the Sunday Times in their bed. And I came in one Sunday morning when I was starting to apply for colleges, and my father said, here's the classified section. Are any of you old enough to remember the classified section in a newspaper? Okay. And he said, look under look under help wanted chemist. And there were lines of maybe 30 or 40. He said, now look under help wanted businessman. There was no help wanted in the business. He said, you're going to become a chemist and you're going to make the creams. I went to business school. I never became a chemist. I could hire a chemist which I did, and we did okay.
You did okay. But I do want to talk about something that you did when you were in college. You created a cinema club, and you designed the posters for it.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think is quite remarkable. You made a very small profit on that venture when you were at college. And do you remember what you did with that money?
I bought books for the University of Pennsylvania Library. However, wait. Listen, I got to handle you better. I'll run this, okay?
Good.
Okay. All right. The cinema club, I'd sell a membership for $1, and for that you get to see 10 films. It was so successful that we had something like 2,200 members. Okay, but we only had a capacity for 1,000 people, and so I was terrified that someday everyone would show up. So I decided that I would run a competitive film society, and I call it the Film Arts Society, and I sold 3 films for $1.50, and I did very well there. Okay, so from that came the idea later on of creating Clinique to compete with Estée Lauder. If I could do it with the Film Arts Society and the Cinema Club at Penn, I could do this again later on with Estée Lauder. And so I owe my experience to that. I can tell stories, but listen.
That's great. No, I was going to ask you later how that happened.
We serve breakfast later on, everyone. So what's that?
How that happened, but that's remarkable that this film society is that.
Yeah.
But at that early age in college, when you make a little profit and you can stick the money in your pocket, you went and bought all the history of cinema books, and donated them to the university. I mean, that's early on showing something about the kind of man you are.
So I'll tell you a little story, however. By the way, she's not going to invite me here again, so I'm having all the fun. So anyway, the Film Arts Society showed experimental films, and we showed one film called Fireworks, and there was a picture of a man in a sailor's, wearing a sailor's uniform, opened up the flap, he pulled something out, and took a cigarette lighter and lit it, and it turned out that it was a firecracker. Okay. And so, at that, half a dozen people jumped up in the theater and ran out. The next day, I received an invitation from the Dean of Student Affairs to visit with him. And we had a very nice chat, and he said, "Did you preview that film?" I said, "No." He said, "Leonard, let's make a deal." And the deal was that I would preview all the films, which I never did really, but okay. But anyway. And that was Dean Robert Pitt. Okay, nice man. 11 years later, my brother Ronald is applying for the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm taking him down to Penn for his interview. And on the train down, I look in my little itinerary to see who I'm seeing. I'm seeing the Dean of Admissions, Robert Pitt. So we walk in there. I'm like this, and he puts his arm around Ronald. He says, "Ronald, if you are half as successful as your brother was here at Penn, you'll be great. You're accepted."
And I think the entire Lauder family has gone to the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, except for Jane. Jane, are you here?
Jane's here.
Jane Lauder. She went to Stanford. Jane, you did okay too.
Okay, so when you got out, then you went to the Navy.
Right.
And you were very handsome in the Navy. I saw a picture of that.
Yeah.
And you learned a lot about management skills from the Navy.
Well, the reason I went into the Navy was that all my friends, in those days, the draft was around, and all my friends were being drafted, and they became clerk typists for 2 years. I said, I'm not going to go into the Army for 2 years to learn how to type. I want to do something that I can learn something my parents can't teach me. That was leadership. So I applied for Navy OCS, Officer Candidate School, and went into the Navy and did very well. I was on an aircraft carrier, then a destroyer. It was just great duty. I loved being in the Navy, and I know we're not going to have the draft anymore, but I tell you something, being in the military in those days made you a great American. And so I thank the United States for taking such good care of me and educating me. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So when you came out and joined the company officially, you started to create a sales force, created research and development labs, and you brought in professional management at every level, and always talked about hiring people who are smarter than you.
Right. Well, listen.
That's
You can't get anywhere without people who are smarter than you. Can I give you another story? Okay. When I was a kid, I was pretty smart. I thought I was smart anyway. And when I went to Penn, I was number three in a class of 750. And I thought, boy, I was smart. Then I went to Navy Officer Candidate School, OCS. I was put in a section with 24 men, of which 4 or 5 were PhDs. Some had military engineering degrees, etc. And so of the 24 men, I was number 12 out of 24. Okay, 3 out of 750, 12 out of 24. That taught me the greatest lesson in my life. The lesson is, no matter how smart you think you are, no matter how good you think you are, there's always someone around who's better than you. And I vowed, when I got out of the Navy, I would only hire people who are better than me. That doesn't mean that they may have been smarter than me, but they were better than me. And to this day, if someone isn't better than me, forget them. And so if you hear someone saying, oh, I'm not hiring that person, they're overqualified, forget it. Always hire great people.
That's great business advice. You've also said you are only as successful as the people who work for you want you to be.
Right.
I think that's a great line.
Yeah. I think in that video you may have seen, there's a little clip with some little blue notes. I write people little notes congratulating them if they've done well. And Estée Lauder, people call them the blue notes, okay? And so today we had a great presentation at our board of directors meeting from the people at MAC. The minute I got back to my office, I sat down and I wrote everyone a little handwritten note telling them how great they were. If you tell people that have done well for you how much you appreciate what they've done, when the time comes, if you want to bawl someone out, they'll take it. And they want you to succeed because you're congratulating them for what they've done.
Absolutely. Great advice. In 1959, you married Evelyn Hausner. She was born in Vienna. How and where did you meet Evelyn?
On a blind date. Okay, well, another story. Okay. By the way.
We're okay.
Okay. I told you that I did well at Penn. I decided that I was going to go to Harvard Business School. Not apply, to go there. So I applied and went up there Saturday for an interview. It was a bad day, whatever it is, because the guy who interviewed me, I never saw his face, he was cleaning his nails. And he said, Mr. Lauder, what makes you think you're so good? Why should we accept you and turn down so many others? Now, I've never been asked that question before. And I said, you know, I think I'm going to be pretty successful. And I understand how things are done, and I think I can be very helpful to the school. So, not going to Harvard. I applied for the U.S. Navy, and my friend and I went for a 1-week vacation before I went into the Navy. He met a girl, and she's the one who fixed me up with Evelyn Hausner, who I would never have met if I had gone to Harvard. So Harvard, thank you.
And that admissions guy's got to be really pissed off. And your mother must have approved of her right away?
She loved her. As the fact is, of all the girls I ever dated, she's the only one that she ever approved of, liked. Yeah.
That's great. And Evelyn joined the company answering phones at first, and then later created training schools for the store sales staffs.
Yeah.
And was the first PR director of the company, is that right?
She was the first everything. First training director, first PR director, first marketing director, first everything. But we would work together. It was just, understand, the company was tiny. There was Evelyn and myself, and there was my mother when she was there, and a secretary. That's it. And so Evelyn would answer the phone, Estée Lauder, and someone would say, may I speak to the audit department, please? She said, 1 moment, please. She'd press the hold button. Hello, audit department.
That's the way you do it.
By the way, she didn't use her name Lauder. She used her maiden name Hausner because we didn't want to have people think that it was just Lauder, 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 and Lauder. And so I had her interview some people who were trying to sell some advertising, and about a year or two later, we were at Carnegie Hall, and by this time she was 8 months pregnant, and the guy says to her, oh, hello, Miss Hausner. How are you? She said, you see, I made him marry me. And it was years because everyone thought that I had gotten my secretary pregnant. So don't kid. Don't fool around.
I actually have a wonderful little anecdote story about Evelyn that I want to share.
Yeah.
That many years ago when I was at CFDA working on all the breast cancer initiatives, which we know Evelyn was so extraordinary in, and she was being honored at Duke University in North Carolina, and I was doing fashion shows for Duke at that time to help them raise money. I'd come down with designers' clothes from the CFDA members. And when Evelyn was being honored, I remember she called me and said, we're flying down. You and her were flying on the plane. Would you want to come down with us? Well, yes, of course, I'd love to fly down on the plane with Leonard and Evelyn. And went to Teterboro and got on the plane. And it was the pilots and just the three of us. I remember you were sitting in the back of the plane, literally, like, I think, writing checks or something. Look, just doing business writing.
Writing blue notes.
Blue notes, that's what he was writing. And Evelyn and I were sitting, chatting away. And then when it was time, we were hungry. Evelyn opened up the cabinet and took out the trays of food and unwrapping them. And Evelyn's my stewardess serving me food. And I'm thinking, this is really an out-of-body experience. And then she opened up her cosmetic case and started to do a manicure. And she took out and was using nail teak. And I said, what are you using? She goes, don't tell anybody, it's really good.
You're not going to publish that story, are you?
No. Yeah, please, leave that off the social media. Okay, so, and another cute story was a friend of mine, Timothy Greenfield Sanders, the photographer, who had a home near the one you and Evelyn had in Putnam County, which is on a pond, and it's a very modest house, simple and unpretentious, designed by a friend, Thad Hayes. And he said that he was at dinner with you and Evelyn one night and said to you, what does your mother think of this house? And her answer was, can't you tear this house down and build a real house like your brother? And you picked up a knife gesturing to stab yourself.
Wanting to buy yourself a real house like your brother. Oh, my God. But listen, that's Estée. Let's go on.
That's a sweet story.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about how you made the decision to create a company like Clinique, but you explained that with your film societies.
No, because I tell you, Estée Lauder was getting so big, I was afraid that because we were growing so fast, like 20, 25% a year at the time, maybe even more, 30 or 40, that the people we were selling to, the Saks Fifth Avenues and the Neiman Marcuses, et cetera, would demand that the growth keep going. And I was afraid that if we had to keep that amount of growth going, that we'd have to do things that weren't right for the company, promote more, et cetera. So I wanted to bring another company along that would compete. And I said, you know, if I was going to compete with Estée Lauder, what would I do? I thought about all the things that I would do, and that's exactly what we did.
So Clinique was the first big hit.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you one of your biggest mandates was saying, I want to go international, which was a big deal. And
Yeah.
Harrods was the place you
Yeah.
wanted to be. It took about 3 years to crack that, because I think there must be a good business story in there, because Mom went to the boss and not to the buyer, and she didn't like that.
Well, not quite, but she wanted Harrods. And frankly, I didn't know about Harrods, but she knew about it. She wanted...
Thank you. No,
Oh,
don't. Those
okay.
questions for later.
Yeah, good. Okay, she wanted Harrods. And we had a distributor there, and who tried to sell Harrods, and Harrods said, no, we don't want this. So she said, no, let me do it. And so she went to see the buyer of Harrods, and an hour later, there was a deal. And the distributor was so insulted that she would go around him and make the sale that he couldn't make. He resigned the account. Okay? Well, today, the company in the UK does about $800,000 worth of sales. And if that distributor is still alive, eat your heart out.
You also said think small. Thinking small brings big profits. You can do anything if you're small enough.
Yeah.
Which kind of sounds contrary to the scale of the way you do business.
It depends on what you think is small. Like I mentioned to you today, we had a Mac presentation. They have the smallest distribution of any of our brands in the whole corporation. Okay? And but what they will do, they sell very few stores and try to do as much as possible in each one of those stores, so that if you take, for example, a company like Procter & Gamble, their average sale per door, or if there was a Walmart or something like that, they would sell between $30,000 and $50,000 per door. The average sale that Mac will have is about $1,800,000 a door. So, if you have a hot brand and you don't over-distribute it, if you hold it tight, that's thinking small to me.
I see. Interesting. Okay, follow the Lauder to Russia and to China. Where else were the big markets that you opened up first?
Well, Russia and China came much later. The first market was Canada, then came England, then came Italy, and then came Germany and onward. But by the way, the Italians are the ones who grab onto new things and embrace new things the quickest of anyone. And so that we did very well there. And the UK was an interesting little story, that when there is a conservative government, business is slow. However, when there's a Labour government, our business picks up tremendously. So you may think that's contrary, but it really, it's true. It always has happened there. And I think it happens around the world too.
Can you briefly talk about 1995 when the company went public? Why did you go public, and was that a difficult decision for you?
Well, listen, there are many reasons that as time goes on, there are some pressures in the family, et cetera, and we all felt it was a good thing to do. And so we did it, and I went on the road show and sold the stock. For those of you who are in the investment world, you see there are road shows and they're in large audiences or one-on-one. And so I was at an investment house somewhere on Park Avenue with my flip charts. This is one-on-one. I was flipping my charts, and there was this young woman in her late 20s, early 30s, looking at me. I said, well. I said, yes. I said, are there any questions? She said, yes. She said, if your products are so good, how come you have so many lines on your face? That's the thrill of going public.
Do you remember how you answered that?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about Mac a little bit, but tell us about the decision when that was made to acquire a small Canadian cosmetic company created and owned by two Franks who were makeup artists.
Well,
and their face of Viva Glam at the time was a drag queen named RuPaul.
Yeah.
That's got to have been a big risk for a company.
Well, look. I'm a nice Jewish kid from West End Avenue. What do I know about drag queens? I said, you know, look, the world is changing. If I keep on doing the same thing, it's boring. Mac had developed this strange business. All the people who worked for them had their hair dyed pink or green or blue, and they had tattoos here and there. They had face jewelry here and there on the tongue. And so instead of saying they're creepy, I said, wow, that's great. And so we bought the company and started to slowly build it. But the key thing was this, was to keep Mac. Very often people buy a company and try to change it into their image. I wanted to change ourselves to make us like Mac. And Mac today, it's now 20 years, is as much Mac today as it ever was.
And when you bought it, did the whole did the whole family have to approve making an acquisition like that?
Next question. No. But
so after the success of Mac,
yeah.
Were you then shopping for new creative brands, or were they lining up outside the building to talk to you?
No one was lining up. But do you remember the Estée Lauder Clinique story? I launched a clinique to compete with Estée Lauder. I bought Mac, and the first thing I said was, who's the number one competitor to Mac? It was Bobbi Brown. So I bought Bobbi Brown 6 months later. And boy, were the people at Mac mad at me. Oh, God.
But what was it about Bobbi Brown? It was the lipsticks and nudes at Bergdorf who saw the
Brown,
company?
listen, as edgy as Mac was, Bobbi was different. It wasn't a replica. And you know, no one really understood what I was doing. But to tell you the truth, I did, but no one else did. And so...
Well, glad you did, because we all love Bobbi. So all of your acquisitions become part of the Lauder family. Are you a family business or a family in business?
You did your homework. Well, Jane Lauder, who I think Jane may have left. Jane, are you still there? Yeah, Jane and William and her sister Erin went to a consultant and spent the whole day talking about how do we explain ourselves. And they said, we're not a family business, we're a family in business. And we still are a family in business, and that even though we may have the controlling interest, we've never, ever used the power of our vote to make a decision that the professional management didn't want to do. Okay, so we're there, and it works. I'm having a lot of fun. In fact, I got to tell you, they don't pay me much. No, good. No. You're laughing. You're just to see my paycheck. That when my son William became the executive chairman and Fabrizio Freda the CEO, and I got a call from Dick Parsons, who was head of our compensation committee. He said, you know, we have no job description for a chairman emeritus. So how are we going to pay you? I said, pay me a per diem. And so they pay me a per diem, and I'm maxed out at a certain amount of money. Believe it or not, it's not much. But anyway, look. But I do get some dividends. But what I say is that I would pay Estée Lauder. I'd pay Estée Lauder to do what I do. I love it so much.
Do you want to address a little bit about the contribution, though, that some of the family members make to the company? Jane and Aaron and William and Gary got away.
No, Gary's on the West Coast doing a venture capital. Everyone does their own thing. At the very beginning, my mother and father said, you know what you and Ronald should do? You should sit in one office with a partner's desk. Now, that does the work. So each of us does our own thing. So I started, then Ronald, who was, as you know, 11 years younger, came first after he graduated from school. He went to Belgium, went for a graduate degree in business, worked for a factory there. Then he launched, then he and a man named Raymond Bermet launched Estée Lauder in France. And then he came back to the United States, back to New York. And along the way, we were having some challenges in Clinique. And so I came to him in about, I think it would have been about 1971 or 72. I said, look, I'm having a hard time. Would you do me a favor? Could you go in? And by that time, the general manager of Clinique was a lady named Carol Phillips, who had been the senior editor in Vogue. I said, and so Carol and Ronald worked together and built Clinique into the business it is today. And so I owe a lot to my brother Ronald because he helped make Clinique what it is. Now, I love women. And I'm not talking about sex life. I'm telling you, I love women in business. All of the people who were working in cosmetics in the field were men, the salesmen. Ronald created the title and the job of account executive. And we hired women who were well-educated and wanted to do this. And to this day, I think we have probably the people in the field, we have something like 96 or 98% female. Because you know, look at a taste. There's a lady who worked for me, and she was the account executive on Bloomingdale's. And she said, you know, all the men I work with, all they want to do is get promoted. She said, I don't care about getting promoted. What I want to do is do the best job possible. And that resonated with me over the years. And so I love women. I want to hire as many women as I can. And if they're good, they're really great. And anyone want a job here?
No, but it's true. You have some of the best and brightest women in the organization, and you have always been a strong proponent of women in leadership roles. And all those women who actually compete with each other, they all play in the same sandbox and play well and all do the best at their jobs. And that speaks to your leadership.
Well, some of them didn't do so well at the beginning, okay? Do you remember Jeanette Wagner?
Yes.
Remember Carol Phillips?
Yes.
In business, they could kill each other. Kill each other. However, and I couldn't believe it. And then I think Jeanette invited me to have lunch in a summer home in Sag Harbor. And I went there, and there was Carol with her at lunch. Carol is her neighbor. They killed each other and competed with each other during the day. And on the weekend, they were friends. So that's okay. Mm-hmm.
And you also have, I can't not go forward without acknowledging Jane Huddes, who was my first assistant when I started in public relations.
Jane was your assistant? Really?
Jane worked, her first job was working for me.
Wow.
So I don't ask her who was the better boss, because I know that you've had her a lot longer than me.
Jane, who is the better boss?
Okay, so this is a great quote I love that I read about Leonard. Well, one of them, clearly, Leonard has one of the best minds in the business. And Estée is like the Queen of England, and Leonard was Margaret Thatcher. And
that's a great compliment, by the way. Yes. She was a great lady. Yeah.
And a leading competitor was quoted as saying, Estée would be nothing if it weren't for Leonard. He is the brains behind the organization. Honest to God, Leonard did it all. I'll give you her youth due. I'll give her gift with purchase. I'll give her standing in line to see buyers. but he developed it into a company that far and away today has the largest share of prestige beauty in department stores anywhere.
Thank you. Look, I have to tell you, listen to something. It takes two to tango. The company would not be in existence today if it wasn't for the years of hard work that my mother and my father put in. I owe it all to them. The only difference is that there reaches a point when you go this far, and then someone else has to go this far. And in business, there are people who say, if a business goes this large, most businesses run out of steam here. But I was able to come in there. I learned from both of them. And, but they got me where I was, but I was different. I didn't try to be like them. I tried to be totally different from them. And somehow or other, it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
And you always said, listen to your mother. That's good advice. Let's move quickly now to Cubism. 40 years of collecting. When did you actually start seriously collecting? How often were you buying paintings and sculptures? And did you consult with anyone at the beginning, or was just what you loved?
No. I always had someone working with me, you know? And not that I had my own taste. I think I mentioned earlier my time at MoMA, okay? I went there again and again, and I learned. I read a lot. I read and read and read, and then my eye was honed, and I hired people. I had one advisor who was Dr. Emily Braun, who is a distinguished professor of art history at Hunter, and she worked with me for nearly 30 years. And sometimes I agreed with her, sometimes she agreed with me, sometimes we just disagreed. But together we were able to do some great things. I would say that probably, say 50% of the collection was put together strictly by me, going here and there, and 50% was the two of us, maybe more or less. I never really counted, but do you remember I mentioned to you earlier, higher people are better than you? She was better than me.
And when you were buying them to hang in your homes originally, or buying them knowing it was a collection and putting things in storage?
No, I hung everything.
Hung everything.
I'm not going to pay all that money and put it in a warehouse. But by the way, it's not that I want to say, look at my Picasso. We come home every night from dinner, and we go into the living room or into the library and sit down and look at a painting for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe have an after-dinner drink, or maybe have a drink before dinner, and then leave. I loved what I was doing. I really, really, really loved it. But I was buying paintings after the first few years. I wanted to put together a museum collection because I believed that I was only a custodian of these great works of art, and they were someday going to be destined for a museum. And so every painting I bought, I looked at it from three ways. Something I learned from my brother Ronald. And when you buy a painting, there are 3 O's. Oh my God. Okay. I only bought oh my gods. And since I wanted to have it for a museum, museums are always putting things up and then taking them down, putting them in the basement. I would say, will it make the cut? Will it be so good that it had to stay on display? For example, if you go into MoMA, you will always see Van Gogh's Starry Night. Okay? When you go to the Louvre, you always see the Mona Lisa. So I want to have things that no matter who the museum director was, because I'm not going to be around 150 years from now, they would say, that painting has got to stay on display. So that with that high bar, I think we bought some great things and had to overpay for most of them, in truth. But, I believe it or not, I borrowed a lot of money, and I didn't sleep at night because but in any event, it's not that it was an investment for me because I never sold much, but I wanted to have a great collection to go to a great museum, and I think it in good hands now.
Did you always think it would be the Met?
No, I didn't think it was going to be the Met. I went to various museums, and at the end of the day, I said, and everyone made a great presentation to me. I said, if it went to MoMA, and they are a fantastic museum, they have so much good stuff, it would only make them stronger. I'd add strength to strength. If I went to the Met, they didn't have anything like that. They really, literally stopped at 1900. I was looking to transform a museum, and I believe I did. And just so that, and I've always looked at everything that I've ever done is how will it transform something? I believe we've transformed an industry, the cosmetic industry. We've transformed a retailing channel. That's one of the things I do, and I love it. Yeah.
And not only did you give them 33 Picassos, 17 Braques, 14 Legers, and 14 Gris.
I did?
You gave them $22 million endowment to create a research center for modern art.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't have to bribe them, but I'll tell you this. I wanted them to have, by the way, I didn't give them the $22 million.
It's an endowment.
No? What?
No?
I gave them 10, and they put up 10.
Okay.
I wanted them to have skin in the game, because I wanted them to feel that they had as big an investment in that collection as I may have had. And so I think it was 8 or 10 of the trustees who put up the money. And so...
Okay, so that, and you were also chairman emeritus of the Whitney.
Yeah.
And is this true that you did give that museum $131 million to beef up its endowment?
Yeah, that's what the newspapers say.
That's what the newspaper said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And to keep the Marcel Breuer building from being demolished.
Yeah.
Which is even more fabulous.
No, they wanted to sell it and make it into a shopping center. And I said, you know what, guys, come on. Yeah, no, okay. No.
And so now that the exhibition of the Cubism work that you donated is closed, which pieces will hang permanently? Will those go to the Whitney and hang there?
Oh, no.
Where are they going to be? They'll be in the Met. Some of them will stay up all the time?
Some will be in the Met. Yeah, it depends. Yeah. And stay tuned.
Stay tuned. All right, that's a good one. Okay, and tell us about all the artwork you have hanging in the company's headquarters, because you have formidable art hanging at a lot of offices.
Yeah, but you see, my brother Ronald is a great art lover also. So he's the one who pretty much watched after the company, the collection. Although I have a lot of stuff there hanging myself, and it's good stuff. And
yes, it's good stuff. Okay, we're getting towards the good closing questions here.
Oh, boy.
What today excites you most in business?
Creativity. I love ideas, and that I mentioned, you mentioned Jane Huddes, who I think is in the audience.
Yes.
We were talking about an idea that she just created and sold one of our customers on. She was so excited about it. It's a great idea. Great ideas are what turn me on, and that gives me the juices. I could never think about something. I had lunch with a guy in Palm Springs last week. I said, "What do you do?" He said, I play golf 4 days a week, and I play canasta.
Not your speed.
Not me.
What keeps you up at night besides your new wife, Judy?
Judy. I'll tell you something. That probably the thing that worries me the most, and it has been doing over the years, is that someone will not really fully understand what this is all about. Because this is not just an idea of creating something and you sell it. And there's so many things that go into the creating a company and the creating of a product, of an ad campaign, of this and that, and the people that go around it. And what I had started off by doing is telling all the people who were working with me, I wanted to have Estée Lauder be the best company in the world. I didn't say I wanted it to be the largest. I didn't say I wanted it to be the most profitable. I said I wanted it to be the best company in the world. And if that can be accomplished, then I feel that I've done something, because then I have a lot of people who have learned that quality sells, and that you don't have to cut a price to sell something. Good thinking sells. Having future vision sells. And that I'm looking for creating a group of acolytes who say, we can do great things. And so that's what gives me my thrills. Yeah.
In your Leonard Lauder's crystal ball, what do you see the future of the beauty industry?
Well, I can only quote my mother. Okay? When sex goes out of business, so will we.
That's good for Twitter and all the Instagrammers out there. Okay. Can you talk about what you think are some of the most important changes, though, that you would anticipate over the next 10 years?
You know something? Every time I look into a crystal ball, I see something different. I say this, look, we're living in a world market, okay? That it used to be that if you got in a plane in New York and flew to Los Angeles, you saw 80% of the cosmetic industry out of the window of the plane, okay? The world has changed. China is now a major market. The fastest growing market today, believe it or not, is India. It's growing like crazy. What about Brazil? What about the Middle East? What about any of these places? So what you're seeing now is a major change in the world. And it's that change of a world opening up and thinking differently that I love. Now, am I worried? Yeah, because there's a lot of crazy things happening in the world today. And you read in the paper that they threatened the Mall of America in Minneapolis. That's something that I hate to see even thought about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you still eat a non-fat yogurt with sliced peach and whole wheat bread for breakfast every day?
It's a Greek yogurt, non-fat, okay? It's called Fas, and it has live cultures in it. And I'll slice it in half a banana and some strawberries. In the summertime, peaches, okay? And then I like whole grain bread, not whole wheat bread.
Oh, whole grain.
And I like my coffee black without cream or sugar.
Okay.
No
Got
sugar,
it.
please.
Is there anything you wish for that you still want to do that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, there are places I'd like to go to, and the places I'd like to visit. And you know something? If I sat down, I would have a list of books I still want to read, and movies I still want to see, and places I want to visit, and kids I want to see. My wife, Judy, who I introduced you to before, has, if you can believe it, 16 grandchildren. And she's the most young, beautiful woman ever in the world. I want to see her grandchildren grow up. And I'll tell you something. I don't know what your religion's here about, but I tell you, a few days after our wedding, we attended the bat mitzvah of one of her grandsons in Sarasota, Florida. And but by the way, they're great. So at the end of the ceremony, the rabbi, who was her son,
her son who did the wedding,
her son, called all the kids up who were under 13 to the bima, the kids who were the relatives from here and there. There were something like 32 of them up there. I said, holy Christ, can you imagine? Every high school graduation, every college graduation. so I'm going to live long enough to see them all married and have their children.
Well, I hope that's
Okay.
I was going to ask you about your legacy, but I think you've described it and how you want to be remembered. I think ending on that beautiful story is the best way to end. But we have a couple of questions from the audience, so let's go to those quickly. If you have a day free in New York City, what do you do?
What's a free day? It depends on the season, okay? I have a bad back now, but my whole thing used to be getting up early in the morning of a spring, summer, and fall day and taking a walk in the park for an hour or two, okay? I love Central Park. It gives me energy, okay? Then, if I have time, which I always try to have, I'm going to go to a museum. And I would go to the Whitney Museum because I love counting the house. I'd go to the Guggenheim or the Met or somewhere. I love museums. Or I would go to a bookstore, but there were no more bookstores. But I loved going to bookstores and just browsing, and I would always come back with a shopping bag full of books and no place to put them. I'd love having lunch, and if you can eat outdoors, that's great. But there are 2 or 3 little restaurants around our neighborhood that I love because no matter who they are, I always see people I know there, and I just love the neighborhood. I love neighborhoods. And then in the evening, I'll either have a great quiet dinner with Judy, and we love going out alone with each other, or we'll go to the movies, or go to a Broadway show. But to me, New York gives me energy. I love New York. It's a place that makes my spirit soar, and so that's what I do.
I think that probably answers one of these questions, which is where do you often find inspiration? And I think you just said it. Other than Youth Do, what is your favorite product of all time? Could you answer that?
Yeah, I could answer that. Okay. The product that we have in the whole group that has the greatest resale, which is people love it, is a product called Creme de la Mer. And it's really, really good. And that's a company that I chased for years because I love the product. And everyone said you could knock it off. I could never knock it off, so I had to buy the company. And that's what I love. Yeah.
Okay. And last question. If there was one bit of advice you could give your 30-year-old self, what would it be?
Stay healthy, okay? To give my 30-year-old self, okay, you're not going to believe this. I was a jogger. I ran every city in the world. The Champ de Mars, which is right by the Eiffel Tower at dawn. The Red Square in Moscow in a snowstorm in December. Seoul, Korea, around the Emperor's Palace in Tokyo, et cetera, et cetera. I'm paying for that now. Okay? So I would say, walk, don't run.